It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife. Presented by Kaitlyn Jones, Lindsey, and Rachel Caldwell.
The author is Jane Austen. Date and location of birth is 1775 in Steventon, Hampshire, England. Date of death is 1817. Jane Austen was the seventh child of a poor parish rector in 17. By the age of 11, Jane was teaching herself by reading books from her father's collection. Miss Austen's novels, like other female writers of the day, were published anonymously until her death. But most of her novels are about marriage and courtship among the British middle class. However, Austen remained single throughout her whole life.
The novel background, the genre is the novel of manners. The setting is Hertfordshire, Longbourn, London, Netherfield, and Pemberley, all in England around the time of 1797 and 1815. The climax is the search for Lydia and Wickham. The protagonist is Elizabeth Bennet. Antagonist. In this novel, there's not one single antagonist, but rather emotions play as the antagonistic part. Point of view is third person omniscient, and the original title is First Impressions. Okay, the overall summary. Pride and Prejudice takes place in Longbourn, England in the 19th century when social standing in marriage was all that mattered. The Bennet family lives in a house full of girls, all waiting to be eagerly married off to a handsome and wealthy gentleman. Like most encounters of the day, Jane Bennet and Mr. Charles Bingley meet at a ball and things take off right away. While at the ball, Elizabeth is introduced to Mr. Darcy, a snobbish rich man who refuses to dance with Elizabeth due to her low social standing. Over the next few weeks, Charles and Jane's relationship continues to blossom while Darcy and Elizabeth takes a little while longer. Jane goes to visit Bingley at his new estate called Netherfield but gets caught in the rain and becomes ill. Elizabeth goes to tend to Jane, and when they return home, they find that the sisters have become friends with militia officers in a close town. Elizabeth falls for the fortune-hunting George Wickham, but Wickham tells Elizabeth how Darcy cheated him out of his inheritance and that he is a man who can't be trusted. By the time winter comes around, the Bingleys and Darcy leave Netherfield to go to London, England. Jane visits the city hoping to run into Mr. Bingley, but instead runs into his snobbish sister, who tells her that marriage for Jane and Elizabeth is very unlikely. Spring makes its appearance, and Elizabeth visits her best friend, Charlotte, who happens to live near Lady Catherine de Bourgh, who is Darcy's aunt. Mr. Darcy makes a visit to Lady Catherine's and runs into Elizabeth. Over the next few weeks, the two continue to see each other. He eventually proposes, but she tells him no because he is arrogant and unpleasant. She gets onto him for trying to stop Bingley and Jane's relationships and for disinheriting Wickham. Darcy leaves Elizabeth a letter and writes her explaining why he tried to drive Bingley and Jane away from each other, and he explains that Wickham is a fortune-hunting liar who wanted to elope with his younger sister, Georgina. The letter causes Elizabeth to realize that her feelings for Darcy are real and that she needs to set aside her prejudice in order for her to ever have a healthy relationship with him. Elizabeth returns home until the summer, in which she travels with her aunt and uncle up north and eventually ends up in Pemberley, Darcy's estate. While Elizabeth is visiting Pemberley, a letter arrives from home telling her that her younger sister, Lydia, has eloped with Wickham, and they are nowhere to be found. Elizabeth's uncle, Mr. Gardner, and Mr. Bennet go out to look for Lydia. Mr. Gardner later sends a letter to the Bennets saying that Wickham will marry Lydia in exchange for an annual income. The Bennets believe that Mr. Gardner has paid him off, but Elizabeth learns that it was Mr. Darcy. Bingley returns to his Netherfield estate and continues to see Jane. Darcy returns with him as well, but makes no mention of his proposal to Elizabeth. Bingley proposes to Jane while everyone is celebrating the engagement. Lady Catherine visits Longbourn and tells Elizabeth that a marriage between her and Darcy isn't likely to happen. Elizabeth refuses to listen and tells her that while she isn't engaged to Darcy, she will do nothing that puts her happiness at stake. Elizabeth takes Darcy for a walk and proposes to her, and tells her that since the spring his feelings have not altered. Of course, she accepts his proposal, and they are married shortly afterward. In order for Darcy to love Elizabeth, he had to set aside his pride and open up his heart, and realize that while Elizabeth wasn't from the same social status, she was an extraordinary person. The same for Elizabeth. She had to set aside her prejudice against Darcy in order to see that he wasn't all that bad. He just had a few walls built up that needed to be broken down.
The characters. Elizabeth Bennet. is one of the main characters of Pride and Prejudice. She is the second daughter of Miss Bennet and happens to be the most intelligent of all 5 girls. While she is extremely intelligent and witty, sometimes her remarks get the best of her. Her realization of Darcy's good intentions eventually changes her feelings for him, and she is able to set her personal prejudice aside. Fitzwilliam Darcy is incredibly intelligent and honest. He is also incredibly snobbish, and his pride often causes him to look down on those of lower social standing. Darcy's aunt is Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and it is evident that the two are both from incredibly wealthy families. Darcy loses his pride when he falls in love with Elizabeth and realizes that people from lower standings aren't bad people, they just live differently.
Jane Bennet is the eldest of the five Bennet sisters, and she, like Elizabeth, is incredibly intelligent and mature. However, she is more reserved and gentle, whereas Elizabeth has a harsher mannerism. Jane is said to be the prettiest of the sisters, and that perhaps might be what Charles Bingley falls in love with. Jane and Charles are able to easily communicate, unlike Darcy and Elizabeth.
Charles Bingley is Mr. Darcy's best friend and is quite the opposite of Darcy. He's incredibly easygoing and is well-intentioned. While he is wealthy, he doesn't flaunt his wealth, nor does he care about social standing. He purchases an estate near the Bennets called Netherfield and later falls in love with Jane.
George Wickham is a minor character in the story but plays a significant part in the storyline as he portrays the scheme side of society. He not only tries to elope with Georgina Darcy, but he also tries to win Elizabeth over as well. That is until Darcy reveals the truth that he is a society climber. Wickham does, however, win over the youngest Bennet sister, Lydia.
Lydia Bennet is the youngest of the 5 sisters and is the most foolish. She, unlike Elizabeth and Jane, is thought to be immature, self-involved, and headstrong, traits that all come out when she runs away with the fortune-hunting George Wickham.
Common themes: pride, prejudice, family, and marriage. Pride's a constant emotion throughout the entire story in the characters' attitude as well as the treatment of others. The majority of the characters often judge each other, and it tends to lead to several mistakes. For example, pride overtakes Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy when it comes to their feelings for each other. Darcy tends to look down on people who are not of his social standing, while Elizabeth takes pride in her ability to judge quickly. Pride and prejudice often makes us realize that no one is ever pride-free, but with the right influence, it is a habit that could be easily controlled.
Prejudice goes hand in hand with pride. Prejudice refers to the tendency of the characters to judge one another based on outside appearance rather than what is on the inside. Jane Austen often points out Elizabeth and Darcy's personalities be the help audience realize that it is easy finding the bad in others, but finding it in ourselves is hard.
Family is important no matter what time period you are a part of. It not only provides the girl with education, but with manners as well, and determining how well she will be able to marry. While there are 5 Bennet sisters, Elizabeth, Jane, and Lydia are mentioned the most often. Elizabeth and Jane are portrayed as being very mature, intelligent, while Lydia is seen as a silly girl. Mr. Bennet is more of the emotional side of the family. The gardeners, Elizabeth's aunt and uncle, provide the emotional support that is needed throughout the book.
Marriage. Obviously, Pride and Prejudice is a love story, and while Miss Bennet is obsessed with making sure that her daughters marry in some way or another, the readers are able to tell from the beginning that marriages are simply for financial gain, and marriage equals security.
Class, or social status, is a big ordeal in the 19th century. While class is a common theme throughout the story, Austen helps the audience understand that while the upper class may seem cold-hearted, they really do have an emotion. Lady Catherine is a prime example of this. She often treats Elizabeth rudely, but we later see that she does feel guilty about her treatment of Elizabeth. Mr. Darcy is also a prime example of the snobbish upper class. Throughout his relationship with Elizabeth, we are able to see a softer and more emotional side of him. Mr. Bingley and the Gardiners represent the softer side of the upper class. While they are wealthy, they don't flaunt that they are well off, but are instead honest and generous people.
Okay, the movie adaptation. The first Pride and Prejudice was adapted in 1940, starring Greer Garson and Lawrence Oliver. Again, it was filmed in 1995 as a miniseries for A&E Television, which starred Jennifer L. and Colin Firth. The most recent adaptation is seen here with Keira Knightley.
comments at your service.
In an era when marrying a rich man was the most a woman could hope for, Elizabeth Bennet was way ahead of her time.
But as the companion of my future life,
Sir, I cannot accept you.
Don't worry, Mr. Collins. Tell her you insist upon them marrying.
Oh, please.
You will have this house and save your sisters from destitution.
You cannot make me.
From Jane Austen, the beloved author of Emma and Sense and Sensibility.
That is Mr. Darcy.
He looks miserable, poor soul.
Miserable he may be, but poor he most certainly is not. Do you dance, Mr. Darcy?
Not if I can help it.
What on earth have you done to poor Mr. Darcy? I have no idea.
I do not have the talent of conversing easily with people I have never met before.
Perhaps you should practice.
Right, for the next dance, Miss Elizabeth.
It would be most inconvenient since I was going to lose him for eternity.
Nay.
He's so rich.
My heavens, as you must snob you are.
This fall, Focus Features presents the story of a modern woman
Mr. Darcy is engaged to my daughter. Do you think his union can be prevented by a young woman of inferior birth?
who discovered the one person she cannot stand is the one man she may not be able to resist.
Can you expect me to rejoice in the inferiority of your circumstances?
From the first moment I met you, your arrogance made me realize that you were the last man in the world I could ever marry. Do you not think him a handsome man? Yes, I say he is.
From the producers of Bridget Jones's Diary and Love Actually,
He's been a fool, but then so have I. We are all fools in love.
Keira Knightley, Matthew McFadden, Brenda Blevin, Donald Sutherland, and Judi Dench.
You have bewitched me, body and soul.
I thought she did that. So did I. So did we all.
Pride and Prejudice.
And then here are just some pictures. And the left-hand side, there's the 5 Bennet sisters. And then below it is Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy. The top is the Bennet's house. And then below it is Netherfield Estate. And at the bottom right-hand corner is Pemberley Estate. And then our works cited